Hey, how are you? I am Jen Holman from Pantry Community Partnership, and we are here today to talk about how to make a vinaigrette. So in our classes, we have a formula that we use, and it's something you can use at home, so let's take a look. So we like to use a 60-30-10, so that means 60% oil, 30% acid, and 10% of the other flavorings you're choosing to use in your dressing. So when we're making vinaigrettes in our kitchen or at our homes, we tend to use the same ratio all the time rather than measuring each ingredient like in tablespoons. We like to use a ratio because that way you can adjust it to whatever size dressing you need to make. There are many different choices you can use to fit these different ratios. So we have lots of different oils. You can use vegetable oil if you want something more neutral, olive oils. There's lots of different olive oils that have lots of different flavors. So you can kind of choose one that you like and it'll change the flavor of your dressing just slightly. You want to make sure you have an acid that sort of balances out the oil and also goes along with what you're making. So if I want to make like an Italian dressing, I'll use a red wine vinegar. We have rice vinegars, we have balsamic, we have white wine vinegar. Today I'm going to use, I think, the white vinegar just to have like a really straight classic dressing. The seasonings that you can use are like dried herbs and spices. We have a lot of dry spices here. Always have those on hand, but if you have fresh ones, that's great too. A lot of different kinds of citrus, lemons, oranges are nice if you want something a little bit less tart. Something like tahini or miso, if you have them, is really great to add a little bit of depth or creaminess to your dressing without adding cream itself. So that's always nice to put in. Also aromatics, I'm gonna use garlic today, but shallots are great. They look like this. They're just like a small onion. Onions are also really good in dressing. You have to cut them a little bit smaller though. Shallots are a little more mild, which is why they work out really nicely in dressings that we make. So I'm gonna choose out of all of these ingredients today, and we're gonna make a quick vinaigrette so you can see how we do it. Let's get started. So the first step is to decide what flavor you want from your vinaigrette. I decided today to do a pretty basic garlic and thyme vinaigrette because dry thyme is great. I'm gonna crumble it up real small into the vinaigrette. You can use whatever herb you have around. If you like a little heat, this is a great time to add some like crushed red pepper, anything like that. If you want to think a little bit, look around at the spices you have in your house. Sometimes people overlook things like smoked paprika or cumin. That can be a really good, interesting flavor to add to your salad dressing that you might not have thought of. Once you have those flavorings, like I said, I'm gonna use some garlic, I'm gonna use some thyme. Obviously, I've got a little salt and pepper right here. You wanna pick something that might emulsify it. So I'm gonna use some mustard, and I'm keeping some honey around just to balance it out if it gets too tart. These things will help my dressing emulsify or stay together. If you don't do that, it'll separate, which will be fine. It'll still taste good. But if you want that like creaminess and for it to stay together, you need something like that. I'm gonna use olive oil for mine today. Let's get started. So now that I have everything in my container, it's time to whisk it together. If you have a small whisk that you can fit in your container, that's great. I'm gonna use a fork today, which works just as well. If you don't feel like doing it that way, you can put it in a jar with a tight lid and shake it really hard. That can be really fun to do with kids. So you can see that everything is still pretty much separated. I put a good amount of mustard in there, and that's gonna help my dressing stay together. So I'm gonna whisk it like really aggressively. You wanna kinda make sure you're doing it as fast as you can possibly do it. If you have a really tiny whisk, that kind of helps it go a little faster, but a fork is just as good. So you can see it's kind of getting that like golden color from the mustard. It's all mixing up together. The oil is all emulsified. So now you can see, all done like that. All right, so now it's time to taste. I have some carrots here. It's important to taste your dressing after you've made it before you start dressing everything with it, so that you can tell whether you've made it the way that you like it. You can always adjust it if it's not quite the way you want it, but tasting it is gonna be the way to find out, and also tasting it along with the thing you're planning to use it for, because that way you can kind of figure out how it's all gonna go together. I just have some carrot sticks here today, so let's see. That came out pretty good. It is the way that I would like it. If it wasn't, if you've made it and it's not quite right the first time, you can always change it. This is your vinaigrette. It's your ratio. You can figure out how you'd like it. If you think it's a little too tart, you can use a little honey to balance that out. If you feel like it doesn't have quite enough flavor, you can always add a little bit more of whatever seasoning you used. Sometimes if you have, like you want a little bit more flavor but you don't want any more tartness, a really great way to do that is to use a zester like this and kind of get some of this zest off the outside of whatever citrus you have around. It's a good way to get a little bit more flavor in there without adding any more liquid or any more tartness. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope that you will use the graphic that we provided in our caption. There's a link to find it and you can use it at your own house. We are interested to hear what you make, so if you want to share that with us, we'd love that. Again, thanks for joining us and we hope we see you soon.